what are some of the most common challenges that up and coming artists are going to deal with when they are trying to produce their own record?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. It's a really timely question too. It used to be that I would maybe work on 10 records a year. I would produce maybe 10 different artists a year, and so I'd be working with them on their records. And now, it's different in that now I travel around here at Berklee, and then also traveling around doing seminars and master classes. I'm literally hearing thousands of songs a year from artists who are doing exactly that. They're producing themselves, and whether you're producing yourself or whether you're producing someone else, there's this inherent problem that comes about where you have the intention of the artist is here. They wrote a song. It's about this. They're trying to have this reaction to the listener, emotional reaction. Response, and they play it for the listener, and the listener's response is maybe over here, and maybe those two things overlap a bit, maybe 20 or 30 or 40%. And the job of a record producer, and whether it's, if you're producing yourself, then it's your job, is to actually try and get those things in concordance with each other, to where your intention, what you're intending to say, what emotion you're intending to convey, the point you're intending to get across is actually what is being interpreted by the listener. Woody Allen, I remember, said years ago, he was talking about his movies, which I think relates beautifully actually to making records. He would sit in the theater and he would watch his movies, and especially with gags and plot twists and things like that, he'd be reading the audience and he'd think, I only got about 50% of what I was trying to do there, or, oh, that one went really, I got about 85% of that one, that actually came across the way that I had it in my brain. When you're that close to something, the Spider-Man, the musical on Broadway, it was interesting watching Bono and The Edge talking about how they had to actually remove the director who was also kind of helped to write the story because she'd just gotten too close to it. She couldn't see it anymore, and there was problems, and so they actually had to kind of remove her and bring in someone else. It happens all the time in record making. I mean, it's hard enough just as we're talking to another human being. Sometimes, often, our words get misconstrued. You think you're saying one thing and somebody takes it to mean something else, and that's the cause of a lot of misunderstanding sometimes between boyfriends and girlfriends, or parents and or you're just friends, and that's the case too when you're making art, and especially when you're making records. First off, I like to talk to artists a lot about up front, and if you don't have a producer, you kind of have to have this conversation with yourself, really thinking of who am I as an artist, what is my identity, and then what's my vision, what am I really trying to get across here, and what is my intention specifically with this particular song, with this particular verse, with this particular line, with this particular guitar riff, with this particular mix, with this particular arrangement. What is it that I'm intending to do? And if you can keep your eye on the larger vision of the artist and on the larger intention, then it helps when you're in the trenches kind of making these decisions along the way. But to be more specific, you asked, what are some of the specific challenges? Something that I like to point out, and it always comes up when I'm doing master classes and seminars, or when I'm teaching my classes at Berklee, because one of the first things that recording artists, young beginning recording artists, do is they tend to be very eager to just jettison repetition. And what I try to get people to think about is an elegant use of repetition, because just jettisoning repetition. First off, everybody does it. When everybody kind of gets to this fork in the road and they're writing some of their first material, and they could actually use something as a chorus or use something as a motif and repeat it. A lot of times they kind of take a left turn there, thinking that, you know, they're being innovative. Unfortunately, everybody does that. So I can tell you right away, if you're doing that, you're not being innovative. You're not the first one to try this. In fact, just about everybody does that at first. What's interesting is now that I'm traveling around and I hear thousands of songs a year, and, you know, 800 of them have done the same thing, kind of made the same mistake. When I bring it up, it's a little comical almost now for me to hear the answer, which is almost always people say, "Oh, I'm trying to be different." And of course, you're not being different. This is the 800th song this year that I've heard that jettisons all repetition and just meanders and is quote unquote through composed. And, you know, there are a lot of different ways to use repetition, and to use repetition in an elegant fashion. You know, look at the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, the "I Have a Dream" speech would not, you know, be the icon that it is without his elegant use of repetition in that speech. You know, the Beatles, Bob Marley, John Lennon, Tom Petty, you know, Prince, almost Radiohead, Queen, almost any artist that you can name, Sting, that has, you know, that has made a real impact in terms of their material. You know, they may use repetition very differently. Radiohead uses repetition differently than, say, the Beatles did. If you take a look at the track Paranoid Android, which is one of my favorite Radiohead tracks, you know, they've got this riff in there. They've got this motif in the guitar, you know, that does the dum ba dum bum ba dum bum, then it repeats down an octave, bum ba dum bum ba dum bum. That happens something like, you know, 14 times in the first minute and a half. And, you know, it's a very elegant way of bringing repetition into a piece that then, the form of it is very interesting. It's actually a medley of 3 tracks, which is very interesting the way that the form comes around, but they use repetition in a very deliberate and a very interesting way. Now, you know, the most obvious use of repetition is often in a chorus. And the Beatles were amazing at writing just incredible choruses that everybody could sing along with. You know, "Hey Jude" is another example of a song that's got a very unusual form. The chorus doesn't even come in until halfway through the track. The first half of the song is just teasing us about the chorus. We kind of build up and we think we're getting to the chorus, and then it goes, you know, and we don't get there. But then finally the chorus arrives, and it arrives in this huge kind of climactic way, and then the whole second half of the record is the chorus, the na 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 na, and it repeats over and over again. I forget if it's 17 or 27 times, but it repeats over and over and over again. Everybody can sing along. Some of the most fascinating things that are happening in our art form are when we're applying all the new breakthroughs that we're getting in terms of brain science and brain chemistry. And there's a hormone that is released in the brain when people have sex, have orgasms, and also when mothers breastfeed their young. In the most intimate times of human existence, there's a hormone called oxytocin that's released in the brain. And scientists call this the trust hormone, because what it does is it actually creates trust between the humans who are there at the time having this experience. And it so happens that oxytocin is also released in the brain when we sing, and especially when we sing together. So, you know, when I have somebody telling me, "Oh, I don't want to write a chorus that, you know, people can sing along with because I want to do something deeper than this," I say, let's talk about really moving people on a deep level. Do you want to move them to the point where it's as though they're making love, or, you know, frankly, do you want their eyes to glaze over because they're not giving us anything that we can latch onto, and after a couple of minutes, you know, of you know, nothing that's repeating, we're ready to hit the next button. Actually, probably more like in 30 seconds or a minute. You know? Now in iTunes, I guess we get a minute and a half. But, you know, if we don't have something that we can sing along with, that we can, you know, some repetition. And again, it can be different. You know, another great example is Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. Very elegant use of repetition. If you take a look at that, it's not a verse-chorus thing. There is a lot of motifs, instrumental hooks that we might call them in the piano and things. But then also, once we get into the operatic part, you know, there's all these things that repeat that you could wind up singing along with the first time you heard it, you know, on the same section. The Mamma Mia, Mamma Mia, Mamma Mia, Mamma Mia, let me go. You know, no, 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 no. There's all this repetition built into this track in a very unusual but elegant way. So I encourage artists to look at that, use repetition. It really doesn't work to jettison repetition. Repetition is part of who we are naturally as humans. You know, we breathe in and we breathe out. And fortunately, we keep doing that, or else the consequences would be dire. Our hearts beat. You know, we have this undulating pulse that's inside of our chest all the time. And fortunately, our heart isn't going, yeah, you know, that's passé. I've done that, been there, done that. I think I'll do something else for a while. Maybe I'll stop beating for a while, or I'll, just beat like, in a non-repetitious manner. Repetition is part of the natural world, and it doesn't really work to leave it out. So, but an interesting approach. The stumbling block, I think, for most people is that we've all been traumatized by repetition. You know, there's songs that we hate on the radio by artists that we can't stand on the radio, that the chorus, beats us over the head. And if you really don't like, Britney Spears or the Black Eyed Peas or Lady Gaga or something, and you hear one of these songs, it's a big hit and it's got a repetitious chorus, it's easy to mistake that what's annoying you is repetition. Repetition is not annoying. Annoying things are annoying. Repetition is just an enhancer. It will enhance whatever it is brought to bear upon. So if there's something that's really great, that you really dig, you want it to repeat. And often when I'm working with artists, I'll say, this part of your song is great. I would love to hear that again. I think maybe this is a chorus. What if we repeated this a few times? And it takes testicular fortitude to say, what, this is good enough that I want to repeat it. I want to make this a part that everybody is going to sing along with. I want to put it out there. It's much easier to just say, I'll just keep coming up with new stuff and all that. So, you're making a stand when you say, what, this is going to be something I'm going to repeat.